So as you know, CPAC has wound down. And aside from people getting the Breitbart Award there, or I don't know, in fact, the last great Breitbart memory we had came from CPAC, where he was yelling, "Behave yourselves! Behave yourselves!" And we no longer have Breitbart to remind us to behave ourselves. This heartwarming story of CPAC attempting to raise awareness amongst conservatives of just how much they need to extend outreach to people of color and to people who are not like themselves. And so they held a little workshop on how essentially, I mean, I don't even know what the name of it is, of the workshop was.
It's actually literally something along the lines of not, if you're tired of being called racist when you're not racist.
Right.
Like
Yeah. I don't know. It's like how not to be called a racist. And it was hosted, or at least one of the presenters was Carl Smith of Frederick Douglass Republicans. I guess that's an organization. He is an African American, and he was explaining to all of these conservatives basically how we should perceive, conservatives should, and open ourselves to African Americans because we don't do very well electorally with them.
The name of the panel was Trump the Race Card.
Trump the Race Card. Just built into that is just sort of like, how you're going to play poker with people who think you're a racist and prove to them that you're not. It's really not that hard.
Not even prove to them, show them you're not.
Right. It's not that hard to show it if you're not. It's sort of like the absence of your racism sort of speaks volumes. And and the problem is that they couldn't even get this workshop going without the absence of racism. Because in the middle of this presentation by Carl Smith, a gentleman got up, a man named Terry, who had a Rick Santorum sticker and attended CPAC with a friend who wore a Confederate flag emblazoned T-shirt. And Terry got up in the middle, Scott Terry, I should say, 30 years old, from North Carolina, and had this to say in this exchange.
It seems to me like you're reaching out to voters in that program that you're offering us at the expense of young white Southern males like myself, my demographic.
So I don't know if you heard what he said here. He said, it seems to me that you're reaching out to these other voters at the expense of me, of white Southern guys. Now,
if there's anybody the Republicans are not speaking to.
Well, I mean, aside from the ridiculousness of that, but for this guy, it's a zero-sum game, and that's the problem the Republican Party has, right? Is that they cannot, in terms of their DNA, actually outreach, because the idea of outreach is necessarily, in their minds, you're taking something away from me.
I study literature, English literature and stuff, and as I read about the past, I really came to love my people and my culture. Okay. And that, I know that's anathema. I mean, I know that's bad to say. So
nobody said that.
Yeah. So my question would be, I feel like my people, my demographic, are being systematically disenfranchised. Yeah. And furthermore, people like the lady over here in the red shirt applaud it and say, "Yay, that's good." My problem is, why can't we be more like Booker T. Washington Republicans and his famous statement that let's be unified like a hand, but separate like the finger. Okay.
So what he's saying here is he wants to be more like Booker T. Washington, which is basically in his mind, it's be like the hand. We're unified at the hand, but we're all separate fingers, which means that we all go into our silos. Now, I don't know, even if you have that philosophy, how it is that outreach, electoral outreach by your Republican Party infringes upon that. Or, as he says, it infringes upon his notion about loving his people. After he read all this literature about white people, he came to love them. And so this was the response by Carl Smith.
The question is, why can't we be more unified by Booker T. Washington Republicans versus Frederick Douglass? They call Booker T. Washington the second Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was the originator. Okay? So when you study Douglass, Douglass was not...
How about the unity and diversity?
What about it? Douglass talked about that. Give me an example. Here's an example. When Douglass escaped from slavery, I think 10 years or 20 years after he escaped from slavery, he writes a letter to his former slave master and said, I forgive you for all the things you did to me.
Forgiving him with shelter and food, all those things?
No. Listen, wait back now. Wait now.
Now we should pause it because I want you to know why everybody in there was aghast. Because Carl Smith is saying that what Frederick Douglass did is that he, 20 years after he was a slave, apparently that the Federalist Douglass Republicans don't do really granular research on their namesake. But 20 years later, after he was a slave, he wrote back to his former slave owner and said, I forgive you, in pursuit of this unity but diversity. And the guy in the crowd says, oh, he said, I forgive you for giving me food and shelter. And the amazing thing on this video is you can see there's a woman sitting 2 seats and she's just a cat. She can't believe what this guy is saying. I mean, they are just like, and the funny thing is that this is how out of touch those people in that room are. They're shocked that somebody would say this. But in fact, to us, it's sort of like, this is what the problem is. There's a reason why you need to hold this seminar, folks, about just, it's not what can we do to help the plight of African Americans? How can we enfranchise them? How can we have a society that is more integrated and more support? It is, how can we trump the race card? Continue on with this reaction.
All right. Let me be honest. Let me address your first question. Yes, let me address the first question. We're going to move on.
I'll let people throw stuff.
Well, you said something about my people.
That's all right. That's all right. I'm one of your people.
Let me address this.
I'm thinking about the lady.
Okay, listen up.
So mayhem ensues. We don't need to follow all that there. But basically the guy's saying, I'm one of your people. Speaking of all the people who are in there. And apparently Think Progress caught up with this guy who said he'd be fine with African Americans who were, if they were permanently subservient to whites. He also claimed that African Americans should be allowed to vote in Africa. And that all the Tea Parties were as concerned with the same racial problems that he was. No way to know if that's exactly correct. But the funny part is, apparently Carl Smith went on to say, released a statement, and reserves the brunt of its criticism for the female reporter who raised objections to the comments being made in the room. In the middle of my delivery, he says, while discussing the 1848 Women's Rights Convention, I was rudely interrupted by a woman working for the Voice of Russia. She abruptly asked me how many black women were there. So that was, as far as Carl Smith could see, was the biggest problem in the Trump the race card workshop.
That was what the whole room said. I've read articles where Think Progress or Talking Points Memo interviewed attendees of that panel, and they said, oh, everything was great. That young man had a great question until that black liberal woman had to interrupt.
Yeah, there you go. I would say that the workshop, on balance, I'd probably give it somewhere around a C or a D for effectiveness.